Welcome. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm the Vice President of Application Development here at KPI Digital. I run a series of innovation events throughout the year focused on connecting the dots between strategy, technology, and operations. So for 20 years, KPI Digital has been providing solutions to our clients by improving their decision-making processes and optimizing their business. We offer proven solutions around digital experience, application development, data, analytics, AI, and performance management. Our value stems from our people who have extensive knowledge and deep expertise in managing data and turning it into actionable insights. So it is easy to get seduced by the latest buzzwords: AI, IoT, frictionless apps, autonomous vehicles, blockchain. These technologies can and will have a massive impact on our work. But how do you balance the art of the possible with the art of the practical? So for today's innovation event, we're here to discuss how to turn disruptive change into a source of untapped opportunity, and also how to capture and leverage innovation as the engine for change. So disruption is occurring all around us at dizzying speed, and companies that fail to address and adapt quickly risk profound challenges. The good news is that identifying and addressing the disruptions that are likely to lead to vulnerability can also benefit organizations to radically innovate. So today's session will highlight the trends and disruptive forces that decision-making and business cases need, best practices around the methodologies and tools used to harness ideas and track progress, technology's role in the final solution, and fourth, the outcome, impact, and specifically how we measure innovation success. And finally, the realities, roadblocks, and challenges, and ultimately how to mitigate risk. So I want to share a few thank yous before we get started. And to my executives on our panel, we have Dany Meloul. Dany is the General Manager, Télévision for Radio Canada. She's responsible for several channels, as well as their streaming platform. With a long track record in the media industry in Quebec, she has in-depth knowledge in a context where business models are being challenged by the competition of digital giants and the changing habits of the French-speaking audiences. So Dany was also previously the VP Programming, as well as the Assistant General at Bell Media. Prior to that, she was the VP Legal, Regulatory, and Business Affairs at Bell Media. So I'm also joined, and thank you, from David Willows. So David is the Executive Vice President, Digital Innovation and Brand Experience at Green Shield Canada. David is always ahead of the curve, whether in terms of industry trends or up-and-coming innovations in digital health. So for customers, this translates into innovative and meaningful solutions that meet their objectives. No one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach there. So he's built his career through progressively senior leadership positions in all aspects of health, dental, and disability management. And he's also led at organizations such as Ann Hewitt and Liberty Health over his career, including roles in operations, product management, and marketing. I'm also joined, and thank you, by Nastaran Bisheban. So Nastaran is the Chief Technology Officer at KFC Canada, which is a Yum brand subsidiary. So Nastaran is a very passionate, energetic, and seasoned technology leader. She's a software engineer and a computer scientist by education. She also has an MBA in leadership from Harvard Business School's Executive Leadership Program. And she's also a public speaker on various disciplines of technology strategy to round it all up. So she's a visionary that challenges the status quo, a risk taker, and a decision maker with a proven make it happen personality. Nastaran is an experienced leader, including roles as VP of Global Technology Delivery at Rakuten Kobo, as well as AVP Technology Delivery at Canadian Tire. So each of the panelists is open to connecting on LinkedIn, so I've added their LinkedIn addresses. Plus, feel free to share your experiences on social using the hashtag #InnovationEvents. And a big thank you to the KPI Digital team that supported the marketing and technical process. Although they're behind the scenes, they're just as critical to the event's success. So I wanted to give a shout out to our marketing, sales, and technical teams. So we have our first question. There are 5 key areas that we're going to go through with our panelists, and I thought I would start with this first one. And when I think about it, we've lived through at least 24 months of the pandemic, which was disruption enough and escalated the need for work from home, for communication and collaboration tools, as well as real-time decision-making. So what are the trends and disruptive forces that you see driving the business case for innovation? So I'm going to start with Nastaran as the CTO. How do you know what trends to focus on in order to drive change throughout the organization?
Good morning and good afternoon to our audience from other time zones. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you, Nicole, for having us here. What trend to look for? This is a very tricky question for a CTO who's insanely in love with the latest trend and everything else. So probably the question is how you ground yourself back to earth to make sure that what you are actually putting in the lab and into the restaurants are truly fixing a problem. The clue is very simple. We trace back to the challenges and problems that our team members and our customers have, and try to marry those innovations towards fixing a real problem in the field for our restaurant team members and for our consumer, whether if it is from making the order and pickup better, click and collect better, to how to provision and plan the number of the pieces that you are gonna take and cook today. So the root cause of all the innovation is coming from fixing a real problem and real issue in the field and with the customer.
Okay, that's actually a good point. I was thinking about it, technology, but you forget when we have the restaurants, there's a whole other aspect to think about. So David, as an executive at a healthcare organization, definitely the latest healthcare crisis impacted your decision-making. So what's driving your business case?
So thanks, Nicole, and good morning to everybody. I probably have to go backwards a bit to try to sort of explain our specific situation at Green Shield Canada. And if you know Green Shield Canada, it's probably as a health and dental benefits administrator. You might have had benefits with us through your employer or bought individual policy from us. You may see our Sure Health commercials on TV. But we felt a little bit disrupted even before COVID. And the things that were challenging us were, one, every election cycle, there'd be a conversation around national pharmacare. And if you're a health administrator, that one makes you a little bit nervous. The concept of nationalized prescription drug programs, while it wouldn't remove Green Shield from the landscape, it would certainly impact us materially. The other disruption out there, and I think this goes across boundaries and not just our industry, was sort of the digital revolution. And often I would hear the start of the phrase, what if Amazon decides to take us out and take out everybody? And certainly there are probably better ways for Mr. Bezos to build a kitty, to build his personalized penis-shaped rockets than to come into Health and Dental Benefits Administration in Canada, just because of the regulatory framework. But you accept the premise that, hey, there are going to be upstarts that come in and just have a better customer experience from you, who allow people to buy insurance faster than you can. So that was in our mind as well. We had said, because of these headwinds, we need to have a bit of a shift in our model and protect that core business where we're doing very well in Health and Dental Benefits Administration, but it's not a high margin business. It's threatened by public policy. What is an adjacent healthcare area we could get into? And even pre-COVID, we sort of started dipping our toes into virtual health. Some small investments there. Some partnerships there, and presenting these offerings to Canadian employers to be part of their benefits programs. Not a lot of uptake, not a lot of interest. Certainly a thumbs up that, hey, you're thinking ahead and this is very interesting. It's probably the future, but our benefit plans are fine. Come March 2020, I will say the interest in those virtual healthcare modalities changed dramatically. And certainly had we were always felt like we were down a path. Now we have acquired online mental health companies. We have buttressed those partnerships with telemedicine companies. Last week, we announced that we have purchased 2 pharmacies, one of them a digital pharmacy. So now the business plan is, how do we not just offer these as point solutions, but bring them together in a technological manner and have a navigation for plan members and patients to maybe use all of them in combination, a true clinical experience that's connected, as opposed to click here, click here, click here for the different health issues you might have. So that's sort of what's in front of us right now. And sort of the big sort of business model and technological challenge that we're looking at.
That's good. Again, I hadn't thought about some of those angles, so that's a really important piece. I mean, we all knew that healthcare was really important, but not about how it had to shift fundamentally on the administrative side. So Dany, you've definitely had lots of changes in your world as well, new things. So what are the disruptive forces that you are seeing and what's impacting your business the most?
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today to tell a little bit of the story of Radio Canada and to some extent the CBC as well. Obviously, the world is before Friday, March 13th, 2020, and after Friday, March 13th, 2020. And on that very day, the very first thing that happened, of course, is that all of the teams were sent home with either their tower or their laptop. And we knew that the technology was out there, but would it be robust enough to ensure that we could just be up and running? And that's the first amazing point, I think, for whatever business we're in, is the fact that people were able to settle into their homes and the businesses kept running. But for the public broadcaster, we have a very specific mandate, which is to inform, enlighten, and entertain. And obviously, during a health crisis, the very first thing you need to do is to inform the population. We don't have to imagine, we lived it. We're back home. Everyone's worried in those days. Remember taking your groceries and washing them before you brought them into your home? There was a lot of panic. And we do have specialty news networks that are subscription-based, but we knew that the population needed to have access to information free over free TV. So the first thing we did that very first weekend was change our programming grids to accommodate over 5 hours of news every day so that we could have Mr. Trudeau's press conference and, depending on your provinces, Mr. Ford, Mr. Legault, etc. So that took a lot of work in those first few hours, and we weren't even sure that the programming systems would be able to accommodate at that speed, because usually when we put together a season of television, we do it over very many months, and here we were doing it over a few hours. So that was done. And then the second piece of that is that the public broadcaster is always the leader of the pack, because we don't only think about the audiences that we serve, but also the industry that benefits from our contribution. The broadcasting industry in Canada is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we saw how theaters shut down and restaurants closed, and we just didn't want that industry to be in the same position. So we took it upon ourselves in our own studios to continue taping. We have a show in Quebec called Tout le monde en parle, which is a public affairs show. It's usually taped on Thursday for a Sunday night viewing. We decided to turn it into a live show on Sunday because people, again, needed the information as it came. And 3 weeks later, we did something quite incredible, which was to bring back a nightly talk show, which was usually scheduled for the spring, but we didn't think we would be able to do it. Would stars come to the set? Would the band still want to play? How was the public going to receive this? But the public needed entertainment at that point. We were 3 weeks in, they needed that. But by doing these things, and I was really, really proud, I have to say, because at the same time I was watching Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon, who were in their basements with just a screen, and we were in a studio with live guests. So we were really able to do much more. We were able to save the production industry. Quebec is the only industry in North America, only production industry in North America that did not miss a single day of taping. And then others followed suit. So by doing this, we were able to show the government instances that we could do it safely. And that summer, series were taped and everything. So, it kicked us in the butt, but I think we ended up showing tremendous progress through it.
Definitely the speed to market decision making. I know, my husband's a banker, and, we saw a dramatic shift where you're trying to suddenly send home 55,000 people. And big changes, definitely because of COVID. So one of the things that I thought I would do is, after each question, is give like a little takeaway tip to our audience. And so one of the things I'm, commenting on after this one is, because of the biggest trend, that COVID trend, and its related need for resilience and visibility into the global supply chain. The need for real-time answers on manufacturing and inventory means we're seeing demand for like simulations, what if analysis, digital twins within business operations that, before COVID might have been a little bit slower or like on the, leading edge, but now we're seeing it literally in almost every department. So if our audience, if you're not already investigating how to utilize what if analysis as one of the examples within your planning strategies, that's definitely something that you need to think about. And it's complex, but it's not, you reap the rewards of it, and it's definitely worth it. Does anybody have any last comments just before I jump on to the next question?
I can just add the concept and principle of never let any crisis to go wasted. And COVID definitely was one of those. And it showed us the capability that we didn't have. We didn't know we have. The learning and the experiences that we got from it should be added to our muscle memory and come naturally, and the learning. And now that we are coming out of that kind of restrictions, hopefully we continue the learn that we got from that perspective and adjust and make the life easier and better for people that are using technology.
Honestly, you couldn't have had a better segue into the next question when you're talking about learning and muscle memory. And, one of the questions I had next was really around best practices and methodologies to actually harness all these different ideas. So, one of our challenges, especially when we have large organizations, is really to collect all these great ideas that may be coming from employees or maybe out, in the broader ecosystem. How do we rate those ideas from team members in order to create or to foster that creativity? So I have kind of a threefold question for everybody. First, have you ever actually utilized a tool to collect and disseminate ideas? And when I say tool, I don't mean Word. I mean something more comprehensive. Second question, can you share some specific advice on best practices and methodologies used to define whether an idea is even worth progressing? And then finally, how do you track your progress? So I'm going to start with David this time. So innovation is clearly a big focus of your role. What can you share?
Okay, I've got a bit of a bummer anecdote about the tool that we used to gather ideas. I'm going to start with that. We actually did try to implement something over the last 18 months or so to generate sort of ideas throughout the organization. Its aim was innovation. And I think over time, what we found was its value was in continuous improvement and efficiency, and people sort of having that vision of what I do today. And I've noticed it could be a little bit better if we did it this way. We could cut down on time if we did it this way. The ask for innovation, I think, is tougher, just from sort of frontline folks who are very busy keeping this ship afloat, experiencing all the success we're experiencing as a company, but then to say, now imagine a future very different than today. Most people aren't going to go there. I struggle with that on a day-to-day basis, and I've got the word innovation in my title. I sort of try, how do I get through today and sort of meet our business goals today as opposed to what's in the future? So we found the tool valuable, and all of us have goals around continuous improvement and efficiency in the organization. It's been great for that. In the end, we found that going sort of advisory and external has helped us sort of get outside our normal thinking and probe us and prompt us. And some of the things we're working on now, we've worked with a couple of key advisors who have challenged sort of maybe the guardrails we put up around what's going to be acceptable in our industry, what people will buy from a health and dental benefits administrator. And we've really moved ahead, I think, more rapidly using that. In terms of how we're testing to see whether this stuff is going to work, we have greatly increased our external lens. We have created a panel of customers that we go to quite frequently on both ideas and marketing plans. We were in market in the last month to about 4,000 Canadians, both GSC clients and just general consumers, talking about virtual healthcare. And about a 35-minute survey, I think there's about 100 questions in there. Just what is their particular interest? What are their particular health needs? And for us, what is your comfort level in potentially purchasing services from someone you've seen as an insurer or a benefits administrator? And that sort of speaks to our eventual branding of this. Do we need to create almost a new company, a new brand in order to do some of this new work? Because people attach insurance and may have some negative feelings about insurance companies when we're trying to do sort of health outcome-based virtual care. So we just listen a lot more, and I think better than we used to, about what potential consumers might think. And how to get it done. I mean, the biggest thing in my world is there's a lot of talkers out there. And you can interview a lot of folks that seem to have big ideas. What is rarer is people that can sort of plan and execute and actually finish a project. That's really hard. And we are absolutely ruthless about our project planning, about our budgets. We have certainly introduced much more, sort of revenue targets from an early phase that are going to be sort of our guiding light to what we're trying to do here. I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we got away with, we're just going to try some things out, and we know there's a 99.9% failure rate. That's a great job to have, by the way. And we'll see what happens down the road. I think we've gotten a little tougher on ourselves and said, no, if we're investing time and money, and certainly the big sort of digital work we're doing now, there's a very large dollar number attached to that. And we've attached, material revenue targets down the road, or why are we doing this? We can't justify and certainly sit in front of a board of directors and say, we're going to spend this many millions of dollars on new technology to bring these virtual healthcare providers together and not say it's going to bring a return to the company.
There's a question in the future, or the next one, where we actually do talk about calculations, the metrics, and how are we actually measuring. So we'll get into that a little bit more in the future. But Dany, you just talked about some pretty major transformations. Like, what would you say, or what could you share with the audience?
I was wondering if you had the ability to roll a tape. Do you have that or no?
Yeah, supposed to.
Okay. So let's roll that little tape. I think it'll, in a nutshell, tell you what we've been going through. Everyone in the audience, I'm sure, has television, but also Netflix, perhaps Prime, Amazon, and Apple TV and all that. So there's been a plethora of applications and platforms that have come along competing with television. So when we say TV today, what we're really talking about is content, and content that can be seen when the customer wants to see it, how they want to see it, on what platform, in what comfort. So it's really all about connectivity with our audiences, and also doing it in the most impactful way for the audiences, because we're in a business of eyeballs, making sure that the eyeballs are are turned towards Radio Canada and its platforms. And to do so, we just have to disseminate everywhere in a very effective way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of when producers come to us, because there's still that whole aspect to it, they come to us and they pitch ideas. Of course, we have systems in place to document what we received, to document what we liked, and also what we're rejecting. And that's really important, even on a legal basis, because it's very possible that we'll do something else later that might resemble, and we have to prove that we didn't copy somebody's idea and all that. So that is really well documented in systems. But the reality of my business is a little bit what David was saying too, is we're very technologically inclined in terms of the production. We've moved away from green screens to CGI to AI. We have a studio now that is the first in Canada that is completely internet protocol based. So that's all going on. But the actual relationship of how content is made, it's really a people business still. We still have meetings. We still go down to LA. We go to Cannes. We talk. And there, the technology is not as supportive. It's really a human interaction more than anything else.
Okay. When you were talking earlier about, harnessing all these ideas and documenting, and this also goes back to David before we jump into Nastaran. Did either of you have a tool that you would recommend? So if you don't recommend it, obviously we don't want to put anybody down, but is there anything that you actually investigated that you were like, what, this is really interesting? We either didn't implement it or we did and we've been using it. I'm just thinking about the actual organization, just to share that. Nothing?
I can go.
Yeah.
First, if I may, Nicole, I want to bring us back to basic. Innovation doesn't necessarily mean to work on a rocket science. Doesn't mean necessarily to build this flashy, big, and different looking technology. Innovation is to the root of our day-to-day work. If one of the developer can write a code that is self-healing and can actually understand the bugs and correct itself, that's innovation.
Mm-hmm.
If a release manager is able to actually build a release train that can go without any specific changes, but gives the test cases to go forward, that's an innovation. So I want us to come back and feel comfortable with the word innovation, and don't think that this is this intimidating something out of reach that only few smart people can actually achieve it and do it. No, innovation is in our day-to-day. And if we ground ourselves with this principle and concept, every single tool that we are using today is going to be one of them that has the potential to help us with the innovation. Specifically on collecting all of the ideas that are coming and how to apply them, I would again put the emphasis on the process behind it. It really doesn't matter how you are funneling all of this. What you do with those ideas after does matter. How you are actually evaluating them, how you are building a business case around it. No idea is a bad idea. It's how much you have money and resource to actually implement them. So starting with a small lab that you can put these ideas into innovation and helping our people that are bringing these pitches forward to also look into answering, so what? So what this, new idea, what is going to happen after? So I want us to actually not be caught into the tool. There are so many of them. We are using many of them actually, but putting the focus on the discipline and the process behind it to ensure that we are actually taking the continuous improvement and continuous growth into the heart of the innovation.
So Nastaran, particularly for you as well, you've got such an organization that's spread out. The employees are everywhere, and some are highly involved in traditional business corporate office stuff and some at a different environment on the restaurant side. How do you pull together ideas that aren't always coming from corporate? How do you look broader in the organization? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, we've got a dev team and here how we're innovating big and small ways. But have you been able to, or do you see it in other industries, how we're collecting more at the grassroots level?
Absolutely. We actually go by the pull principle. We actually go after our grassroots and ask questions. So it is not that if they remember to tell us and pushing the information towards us, we go after them and ask. We involve them in continuous providing a survey result. And survey result doesn't necessarily mean, have you been happy with what you have? Is what could be different for you to be feeling better? And back to that principle of build your innovation based on fixing a problem that is coming from the field. This has been very helpful for us to hear what are the pain points, and with the pulling the information from our very diverse area of employee to get this information, put that into, beside our strategy and say, which one of them are actually now in alignment with the strategy overall that we have. And the keyword here is also to go back and close the loop. So people that have provided those kind of, ideas forward, to have them engaged with the build, with the design, with the test, with the implementation and everything else. It takes everyone to have successful innovation. It is not just on a tech and technology group. It is an ecosystem that require different and diverse mind and different and diverse wants.
Okay. So what I will say for a couple of the audience members, there are some tools that either we've harnessed or we've seen out there that are really good as well. But you're absolutely right about the process side. So there are some SaaS tools. We use Miro in our organization and with our clients. Idea Note's another one. There's another really cool one called Board of Innovation. It's not an association, it's an actual tool that's really neat. And again, it gives you some process and guidelines, but we do see it's only as good as the change management side or the team leading it, who are really understanding, like, not just physically what the process should look like, but behavioral change. Like, why do we want to move forward, or how do we get change makers to really step up and things like that. In Europe, it's a little bit different than Canada and US. In Europe, they use board games all the time in business settings. And there's a really great innovation game that I've been part of. There's an agency called Traction Strategy, and they have a game. It's called Dinosaur or something, and I've totally forgotten the name now. But it's a really interesting game because what it does is it takes all those ideas, and you have like a big, massive group setting, like you do it in a large cafeteria or a major room, and everybody plays these games to move the idea forward. And so it's kind of a fun, social way to validate whether an idea that your team has is a good idea. And it's not just within your team, you get mixed within different teams. So it's just kind of another really interesting way to look at it. But the ultimate idea is that process needs to be able to bring you through and validate and get rid of ideas that maybe just it's not the right time or not the right implementation for. Anybody else want to jump on it just before we move on?
I was just going to say, I think you see between how I describe some of the tools and the process we followed and what we perceived as limitations, and then Nastaran talking about sort of the innovation that happens around continuous improvement. There's never agreement on the definition of innovation. Because certainly when it's in my title, there's a commercial lens on it, and it's about product and it's about differentiating in the marketplace. And the continuous improvement, which we love and is sort of the lifeblood of the company, sits in another area. And I know if I went to the board and said, hey, no new ideas this month, but we're tweaking this process and fixing operations over here, that's not what they're looking for. and every organization will have a different definition and a different culture, to what Nastaran said, which is completely legitimate as well. It's just sort of, you have to define that internally and sort of who owns what and what are the goals here.
Yeah. And I think, even within our own organization, words like modernization versus innovation versus transformation, we can arm wrestle even within our own team sometimes. What does that actually mean? Because does it take a lens of jumping forward, something more disruptive? Is it a small incremental thing, but it had something unique in there? And Nastaran, you talked about self-healing ML. Like, that's innovation, but it's a small thing, but it makes such a big change. And I think for me, selfishly, my thing on innovation is it's taking you a leap forward in your thinking, regardless of whether it's a small change or a big change. It's a bit of a leap forward. The one thing that I would say to the audience is, don't forget, if you have questions that you want our executives to answer, or you want to talk about something, don't forget to fill in the form, and then we'll spend time at the end of the event. I just want to make sure we get through everything. But that whole piece that we were just talking about, again, it's a perfect segue to the next question, which is talking about technology's role in the final solution, and whether technology plays a major role, a minor role. And maybe what we could do is, as you explain, and I'll ask each one of you individually, give them an idea of what you felt a small win was that used technology. Like, I want to say a small implementation, maybe is a better way to say it, of whatever that is. And it could be, I'll just say innovation in your organization, and then something more dramatic, just to talk about. And it doesn't have to be within your organization, but just to show the dichotomy of the two sides. Because again, speaking of my use case of one here, I always talk about transformation doesn't necessarily require a technological solution. But when I put my innovation hat on, I always say that if it's more than just incremental process change, that true innovation, true disruption does need to be powered by technology. It's not the reason we necessarily do it. The reason we do it is the business reason, but to take that extra leap forward, it needs that innovation sort of foundation. So I guess, do you agree? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree? So maybe Dany, if we can start with you this time, just talking about some examples in your world.
Yes, absolutely. So, the public broadcaster, when you think of the public broadcaster, you think of something that is established and perhaps a little dusty at times, but really it is an innovation machine. And I want to thank Nastaran, because you really did make me feel better about some of the things that we're doing that didn't really feel like huge innovation movements forwards, but they actually truly are. But I think that technology overall does make us better. There's no question about that. Now, I wasn't around when we went from black and white TV to color TV. I wasn't in this business, but I've been around for when we moved to HD channels, 4K channels, and now SVOD platforms and apps. And I think our greatest strength is our ability to adapt and to meet the needs of our audiences, to really, again, enhance customer experiences along the way. So while we currently have a very, very strong linear brand, Radio Canada is number one in the Quebec market. So that means that, even compared to the private broadcasters, we do better in prime time. So we have this strong brand to lean on, but we are really trying to deploy as much as possible throughout other platforms. So in the French market, we have TV, which is really let's call it a French Netflix, and CBC has GEM, which many of you must be familiar with. And on the radio side, we have audio for podcasting in French and CBC Listen in English. So we have those things that we've put in play, because we know that there's other generations that aren't going to just sit and wait to see when we program things. They want to see it otherwise. The Olympics, we just had Olympics, and for the first time, our audiences turned more to the Olympic app than they did to our Olympic coverage on TV. So that's a significant change, and we know that people are mobile and they want to make contact with our content whenever they can and however they can. during the pandemic, now this is going to surprise many of you, I'm sure, but Radio Canada, public broadcaster, during the pandemic, we saw people are home, restaurants are closed, we're cooking more. So we launched an app called Mordu. Mordu in French means bitten, but it really means hooked. And it's hooked on cooking. So it's short content, how-to tips and lots of recipes. And we're really building a very robust platform with over 4,000, 5,000 recipes at this point, and people gravitate towards it to use in that way. So who would have thought that the public broadcaster would be in the recipe business? The advertising also, I want to talk about advertising for a second, because advertising we're really moving away from that 15-second slot on TV that you're used to. Now it's really targeted advertising, depending on what we've seen people look at on our various apps. Then we know you're really in the market for a red Ford car, so I better show you as many red Ford cars as I can. So we're doing all of those things. And as I mentioned before, the biggest move, of course, is that our studios, we're going into this Internet Protocol studios, and other great broadcasters around the world are coming to Montreal to see what we've put in play, including BBC, ABC. So it's quite amazing that we've just been able to continue to say, okay, yes, we have content and we have a channel, but beyond that, what can we do? And those are a few examples of technology leading the way for us.
Okay, that's good. Nastaran, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the innovations that you see in your organization, or even outside of your organization?
Absolutely. So from the angle of the technologists, I want to dissect a little bit more the self-healing concept of the code. We start with, a code that needs to be constantly tested before it is put into the market. Then we have started to create the test automation. So when the code is done, it will go through a funnel of the test automation, and all the test cases will be applied, and you will see the, bugs and everything else out of it. Now, the next step after that is those detected bugs, how we can actually make sure that those bugs, although might be into the production, won't fail the system, making the impact smaller and smaller, that even if the bug is there, it will cause only a small functionality not to be available, as opposed to the entire, system to come down. And the next step is actually that self-healing. Now that we know this bug happened, how we can redirect with a smarter error message, with a smarter take action after that can actually start adding value to the end user, and they are not seeing page 404 was not available or something like that. What can they do after the fact? So these concepts are so basic, at the same time so impactful to the overall concept of building a code that is better maintained and is better scalable. This by virtue have a good impact on what is coming. So previously, if for writing a code, testing a code, we needed 5-10 people specifically on that work, now we need, just 3-4 people to do the work. Now the rest of the team members can actually go back and look into the what if scenarios that they can actually expand. So how innovation fundamentally can help with bringing other functions and other wants back at the table, even feeding the budget to those. These are the area that we are paying a lot of attention to, and making sure that we look at it holistically and from the overall ecosystem of having innovation as a core center for the growth, for a disruption, because without coming out of our comfort zone, we won't be having those magical moments happening, and looking at it as a holistic business impact. again, innovation is not going to only impact technology or only be driven by the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an enabler at the heart of it. And there are some really interesting things, and I totally need to go for virtual coffee with you afterwards and pick your brain a little bit. But I think that was the part I was saying before. It's it really is about where do we need to go? How do we need to change our business? And how do we use technology in different ways to enable? I can think of so many ways that we've seen technology have those leap forwards, and whether it's DevOps or whether it's HR, and I'm going to give an example afterwards, or, all sorts of lines of businesses outside of technology that are embracing it a little bit more and thinking about, what could they do different? How do they analyze
Absolutely.
the data?
I can give you another
decisions?
example.
Yeah.
Amazon, comparing to the rest of the competitors, while everyone was trying to find out how they can make sure that every click is more efficient, less time consuming, and going through the right thing, they have changed completely everything through one click. So as opposed to step by step, make sure that all the clicks are working well, they went ahead and said everything is going to be behind the scene. You just have one switch, and well, we all know where our money is going on online shopping with this simplicity. This is brilliant. They know how to basically make it the easiest, fastest way to go through it. So here comes the behavioral economy that needs to be hand in hand with the business, with the technology innovation that will help us understand what better serve our consumers, our users, in a way that they have less friction. So any innovation that is sitting on the solving one problem, have less friction between the time that consumers are at your door, your website, to the time that they have been served.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was saying earlier about frictionless apps. And our president, Benny, would always say, remove the noise, get anything out of the way that people don't need to deal with. David, what about you? What do you see that's worth investing in or using it to enable either your organization, or what are you seeing out in the industry?
I'll just give a quick example of something, and I hope nobody from my team is watching when I describe this as a smaller project last year, because it was 18 months and a few $1 million, and it killed them all to get it delivered. But it was basically taking sort of that primary plan member portal for folks that have their insurance through Green Shield Canada. That's where they submit their claims. That's where they see what's in their plan and what they can claim for. That's where they can find a health provider that's in good standing, and their claim will flow through with us. But basically, we took a 15-year-old platform and completely rebuilt it from the ground up. API layers, which are obviously very important, just sort of the efficiency inside the system. We used to have to sort of write a note to IT if we wanted to change a word on the website. It would come back 6 weeks later. Now I can go in and do it like literally right now if I want to. So all of that internal efficiency is there. But what we did, and it speaks to what we just heard about sort of the Amazon lessons, we actually had that panel of GSC plan members, and we had about 20 of them looking at our builds, our designs, every step of the way. And we have this amazing video of them trying to navigate the new platform and telling us how bad our initial designs are and how it's not working and how their eyes go here and we're taking them here. There are too many clicks, and that really informed what we built over a 3 or 4 month period. And we really haven't got any excuses after that for people struggling to navigate through the site. Move on to today, and now we're doing the big T word, the transformation, to have that broader vision of hooking that sort of base platform where people do their transactional work with us into a healthcare marketplace, perhaps, and really eliminating, if they go in and visit one of our healthcare providers, is there even a claim anymore? Because it's all interconnected into the insurance administration system. Now it's a little bit tricky to pull this off. We've got a bit, and we're calling it a digital transformation, because the new technology we need to bring in around sort of CRM, much deeper data and analytics. We need to use the cloud a lot more than we're using now. But the danger in that is we are absolutely being seduced by cool technology every day of the week, and talking to all the amazing people out there that we're gonna partner with to do this. And even this week, we had a session on this project where we were very focused on we have to be able to move and afford inside our budget this cool tool right here into phase one, which is going to take us to about the end of 23. And it's like, yeah, we have the vision that I just described. Obviously, you need this tool. And then we sort of stopped and said, can anybody in this room describe how, in fact, we're going to use that tool come January 2024? We know it seems to fit the vision. Does anybody have a clue? Crickets. We had not written out at all how on earth we're going to use that thing and where it plugs into all the other ideas we have. And now we're doing some workshopping on that before we decide to spend the 7 figures that we would have to try to fit into this contained budget to try to get that in by December 2023. And those are sort of the daily sort of debates and decisions you have to make. And you can get seduced by that shiny toy. It's like, well, of course we need that. And we have to find the money to do it. By the way, we have no idea what we're going to do with it.
Yeah. And actually that brings up a good point when you were talking about the portal. You know, when we think about the different audiences we have, and obviously sometimes our audiences are external consumers, sometimes they're other businesses, sometimes they're even our own employees. Everybody wants a bit of a meaningful interaction to create that. And David, you would probably highlight this as well, you know, that need to have that user experience that is like a wow factor. You know, you're winning their hearts and minds, which is super important to somebody owning the brands that they use. You know what I mean? Like instead of just a product they purchase. But when I think about that, this goes again back to your portal, is the need, you know, I see it more now. It used to be like, oh, we have CRMs and they help us understand our customers, but like the employee experience portals, you know, we want to know what the journey that our customer actually goes on. And when I say the word customer, I'm using that very loosely because if I say the word user, our user goes on it, it kind of has a different experience or meaning. But, you know, the employee experience portals, customer data platforms, you know, a customer 360, employee 360, just understanding where they are in the life cycle, you know, coming on, how do new employees think differently? You know, how do we ensure that we reduce churn of our employees or our customers? You know, what are those behavioral triggers we talked about earlier? And somebody talked about personalization. I can't remember which one it is, but that's like one of my favorite things to do is use the data about everybody's behavior. And I think, Dany, that might have been you, where we say, okay, well, you know, we saw the pattern that someone took, and it doesn't have to necessarily be an external customer, but it's obviously the easiest one to explain, where we think about like where they've been, why did they go, how do we use heat maps, how do we understand what's actually important to them so that we're not looking at it through our own, you know, myopic lens of, well, this is how I think, so everybody must think that way. So that dynamic personalization, anytime we can get it, I think is such a cool opportunity. You know, I open up an email and my email is very different than Nastaran's, but we're both getting an email from David. You know, what the content, the look and feel, the images, all that kind of stuff are cool. The other thing that I would say, you know, kind of around that whole employee experience is using things like digital assistants or chatbots or cognitive AI or whatever label you want to slap on it to help employees navigate. You know, I've seen them in HR now that we're all working from home the HR teams are overwhelmed with the amount of emails that are coming in saying, what do I do? I'm coughing. Am I allowed to come into the office? Can I come into the studio? You know, all that kind of stuff. So using them to talk about, oh, you know, you can claim that paper now that you're working from home or you can't. So answering questions about expenses, answering questions on healthcare, you know, what benefits, using that kind of thing. where I see table stakes, it's really more around customer service or, the marketing chatbot, in the bottom corner right of the TV or of the monitor. So I think those ones are a little more table stakes now, but thinking about it in different ways. I've even heard of chatbots in procurement to help with RFP. It's like, you just don't think of how to use technology in like completely different ways. Does anybody want to touch on again, something they've heard, seen, done? Just before we move on. Nothing? Is that my crickets? Okay, so we have another question, and it kind of goes back again. Everybody's touched on this a little bit, is really looking at outcomes or impact and measurements. And I tell the story all the time, and I'm always like dumbfounded. We can work with clients that are like 65 billion or 43 billion or even 100 million. And when we talk about, how are you measuring success with any sort of meaningful metrics, it's literally, they just don't many opportunities, not every situation, not every, but we're not seeing like, so when I say like, oh, how do you measure? Is it top line revenue, like David? Is it about profitability because we're improving processes? Is it NPV, like some of our industrial clients? Do they actually measure opportunity loss of just standing still and sticking with status quo? And I get it's difficult, especially when we're doing something we've never done before. So how do you measure against it other than taking some generic industry, trend or metric? But I'm often surprised that I'm greeted with, we're just not going to measure it that way, or, well, we just have to do it, so we're not going to worry about measuring it because it's super important that we do it, or, well, it's not bringing in revenue, so, we can't really measure how it makes employees' lives easier. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, of course we have to do it. So are there situations where rightfully so you don't need to measure in a specific measurable way? And when you do measure, is it always the same type of metric? Is it always revenue or profitability or cost benefit analysis or whatever? So again, I'm going to go around the circle. So Nastaran, can you share what you're doing or what you're seeing
Sure.
from your peers?
And first of all, to answer if there is any area that we choose not to measure, the answer is no. If you don't measure, there is no way you can know if you're doing well or not.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no area that we say we have to do it regardless. If we have to do it, it's because of somewhere some measurement is telling us that this needs to be done. So first and utmost, no measurement, no meaning. So everything needs to be properly measured. Of course, not going through the vicious circle of the analysis and getting through that so in depth that we cannot actually take action on the result of measurement, but measurement absolutely needed. Another area that it is, you have phrased it very well, is it's not all about the green dollar. Green dollar is only one factor of many, many brown dollars that exist and we don't pay attention to. The frustration of our customer, the frustration of the employee, the efficiency of their work. So we think that they have been able to, respond to, 10 customers per second, just hypothetically. What cost from the employees behind it? What did it mean? Did it come at the cost of they not taking their break? Is this coming from the factor that they had to actually push their other works to after hour because they had to take care of this? And those are all the area that as little as it might sound, it is going to impact the sustainability of the future of the work. And that sustainability is so important that can actually trump all other benefits that we got. so what that we have an amazing thing that wows everyone and we cannot support and sustain and grow it for a longer period. So those are the hidden measurement and KPIs that it's very easy to overlook. We are trying to be smart enough and go after those measurements and put them side by side to actual financial green dollar, because quite frankly, those are the ones that will help for the sustainability. We definitely do need the financial to feed for the rest of the work that we are doing. But without that, it's not the best usage of our green dollar.
You know what? That is like a perfect point. And I hate to say, I thought about it selfishly. As soon as you said, I was like, oh my God, you're right. Because we do in our haste right now. And it is one thing that I see culturally in organizations, the decision-making is like so fast now. We have to respond right now, do this right now. And that we never saw at the pace that we saw it before COVID. And you forget about it's not that we forget, but it's equally important to realize what got pushed off. Was it important that we responded in 10 seconds versus 11 seconds? Like, what was the financial metric or the cost to culture or maintaining employees or, whatever. So that's a really big piece. And David, what are you seeing?
My experience, and I may have, sort of portrayed myself today as sort of like the driver. We're going to get the projects done. There's a commercial vision and all of that. We have an interesting environment and culture where we're, at the end of the day, we're a social enterprise. So we take the business very seriously and we have commercial goals. But it all rolls up to sort of this vision of sort of reinvesting in healthcare and research, driving system change inside the Canadian healthcare system. And one of the interesting metrics we have is lives impacted. And when I sort of talk about this vision of how can we interconnect some digital health and have people get access to it maybe faster than they get access to care in the system right now. And we're partnering with organizations who we believe have a view to health outcomes, not just getting people on the site and sort of moving them through, but improving people's healthcare. We also see, the commercial opportunities by creating a system like that, but we see the opportunities to impact Canadians in their healthcare in ways that they haven't yet. And we're counting those. We're counting the people that come through, and we're trying to be very honest with ourselves on what can we take credit for inside of this eventual ecosystem and what would happen in the system otherwise. But it's good. And that's probably what brings the culture together and the motivation and the engagement score, is that it's not just, okay, get the project done. Did you hit the budget and all of that, which I tend to talk about a fair bit, but it's also how many people are now able to flow through and get a sort of a quality of care and access to care that maybe they didn't have before. So yeah, to step back from the innovation, and it's not just always commercial. What are we doing sort of in a broader way for the system and to engage employees and to engage consumers in the end?
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to ask this question after, but I want to hit Dany, and this is the exact question I want everybody to formally answer for me. So Dany, when you guys look at success metrics, and I want you to tell me, I hate to say soft because we still measure them, but cultural as well as financial, what do you measure? What are the actual calculations? Is it NPV? Is it ROI? Combination?
I think you hit on it with the cultural, but, like many organizations, of course, we have a strategic plan. And like Nastaran said, if you don't measure it, it may not get tabulated or get done. So we're very, very key. We are very keen on making sure that we meet our metrics. But they're not all financial metrics because the role of the public broadcaster is really a role of engagement with the population, and we live in a very vast country. So how do we do that? And we've had a lot of work internally to educate the stakeholders around us. So first, the producers, they didn't really understand why we're moving away from just ratings to other KPIs because we're on other platforms, and on those platforms we haven't always tabulated it the same way, and we're imposing on them that We no longer want you to deliver a show only in September or January, the two main television seasons, but all year round. And by the way, we need all 10 episodes in one send because of the binge watching. So they had to change their paradigm and accompany us in that. We also had to educate our teams internally, because that's a lot more work than having just 2 seasons of television, this ongoing machine that's always going on. That was also a lot of work was around that. And then interestingly enough, in the French market particularly, we had to educate the media, because the French market is very much covered by media. Journalists cover everything that goes on in television, and they're still fixated on ratings. So our new KPIs for us, they're really, our success is looked at in terms of, yes, how many people saw it on TV, but also how many people saw it on other platforms, something that we never tabulated before. Then there's the engagement component, the communities that we create around our shows. That's a huge piece now. I walk around my house all day long with an iPad. So even if one of my TVs is not on, I need to know, are people liking what they're seeing? Are they talking about it? What's going on? And sometimes before I get the ratings the day after, I already know if I've had a success just by the way people interacted with the content online. And EDI, we haven't talked about this at all today, but in my business, it's huge right now. So all the questions around diversity, how to make sure that we speak to all Canadians, and that what we put on TV or the content that we put out there reflects, all Canadians in our society. So those are our new metrics, and they're hard because they're kind of intangible in some ways. But we're working on it, and I think that every year our strategic plan is better defined to include these components. But our KPIs are definitely changing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm going to just move on. I was going to ask a little bit more questions, but I just want to be sensitive to the time because I know we have some questions at the end. Again, audience reminder again to add your questions to the form in the Q&A. So all of this change, all of this thinking, and David, you're right, you reminded me, you are a social enterprise. So when we think about all of the challenges with implementing big change or little change, we have roadblocks and disruptive innovation is tough, because if it was easy, we'd be on the backside of the bell curve. So there's a lot of ugly realities we need to think about. We've got people that are not comfortable with change. We've got things that don't go according to plan like we thought they would, or the very real concerns about the maturity of technology and at what point do we invest in that? And when I say invest, it's not always about money. Sometimes it's just about time and effort. But with all of that in mind, how do you mitigate risk when you design transformation? And originally I was thinking large scale, but it doesn't have to be large scale. So for each of you, what's been critical? What did you learn? What could you share to your younger self? Any big advice for our audience? So David, I'm going to start with you.
Certainly I've hinted in here at sort of the big project we're in the middle of, or really about to launch. We're still doing sort of the plotting and planning, and we'll be starting mid-year. I do give us credit for having listened to enough people that have gone through something like this, if you're going to use the T word in transformation, that this can all go wrong in many ways. And sort of a fundamental way is, I talked about sort of building that new technology platform last year. We're a bit cocky. It's like we did it on time, in budget. You never hear about that with IT projects, but we did it. So it's like we know we can implement technology. What we don't know is if we can transform our business to use it properly and to use it towards the strategic plan goals. So even before we put fingers on keyboards, or as they put the shovels in the ground mid-year and we start building out this technology, we have struck a team called the Enterprise Transformation Office. And we have hired some folks, they are external, who are going to help us sort of navigate all the interdependencies and linkages of, you built the technology, which lines of business does it impact, who has to be trained, what change management has to happen from a cultural standpoint, from a down and dirty, just we have to teach people to do things differently. We have to rebuild processes. And that work is happening in advance of anything ever being deployed, and sort of our commercial goals being sort of implemented in the marketplace. So it's like, I can't remember the exact day where sort of the light bulb went off saying it's like, oh, we need help before we go another day on this thing and get closer to actually having things deployed. We need some people to help us do that because we're all immersed in the project itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, change management, I think, is one of the biggest things. I'll talk about it in a second, but Dany, what would you tell a peer or your younger self?
It goes at the root of things, it's the people. So it's all about communication. I would say, you need to communicate and make people understand why you're going in a certain direction. And you have to create adherence with the teams. It's not our project to lead alone as leaders. It's a team that's leading the project together. And so they have to be behind it and understand why we want to do things a certain way. I think it's super important, again, back to the communication point, is to report back every step of the way with a lot of transparency and humility, meaning that if we've tripped, you say it. You say that we've made a mistake. We're taking a step back to move forward. So that's really, really important. And interestingly, the last 2 years with people mostly on screen, I feel that there's been even more communication than perhaps before. Yes, we've missed something in terms of the social interaction, but we spend a lot of hours every day talking to people, and I think trust has been built in different ways that way. And at the end of the project, I think people move quickly from one project to the next. I think it's really important to take the time to do a proper postmortem with all the stakeholders, because this is not the last transformation that we're going to go through. There will be others. There will be other challenges. And I think that if we don't take the most from the learnings of this one, it's a missed opportunity. So it's a lot of work in terms of communicating all the way through, but that would be my key message to a peer.
Okay.
And Dany, I couldn't actually agree more. Your brilliant way of putting people in the middle of it is really the key. Human side goes above any other people and above any process and technology that comes into this ecosystem. Well, there is this funny saying that no one likes a change other than an infant in a wet diaper. Change is not comfortable. No one likes it. And everyone, resists it in a different way. With a different kind of outcome. So it is key to how we manage it properly, how we bring people along with us as these changes are happening. So it is not after the fact or here, this is your system, go and use it. And selfishly, it is not just because we want to make sure that the people are comfortable at the end of it. It's a way of sharing the risk with them. As any project will come up and down, there are so many things that can deviate from the first aspect that we have started the project with. So if the change management is happening well, people will actually share those decisions with you. People means the builders, your stakeholders, the audience. They will start seeing it as they go, and they are not ended up with a huge, big change. So my key will be put the human in the middle and break the changes to as small as a piece as possible and make sure it is continuous. So the principle of continuous improvement, continuous communication, and wrap all of this with take it easy. It is very important that we take it easy. My comment to my younger version of myself would be, things will happen. Be easy on yourself and the people around. One of my greatest mentor once gave me one measurement. He was saying, whenever something is really, really hard and not happening, and you are seeing a very bad thing coming out of it, the first question you're going to answer is, who dies? And if the answer is no one, then take it easy and just clear your mind and take action and fix it. And that has been a very, very good measurement for me. Thinking about if no one is being hurt, then there is room for making sure that we have a chance to improve it.
My mom always says, are you going to remember this 5 years from now? If you're really not, and it's not going to impact your life, it's probably okay. If I was to sort of, summarize all of this, I think what I've heard is basically find your internal champions within every stakeholder group. They're not always the team lead, but they'll share how to best engage with the team, important ways to measure that success, how to avoid those painful things, using strong change management team members throughout the whole process, not at the very end as a way to execute, that really understand like people's motivations and how change is different for different people. Like I love change. Like I'm all about like, what can we do different? What's next? But that doesn't mean it's the right way. Somebody else may be reticent to change, but understanding their motivation of why it would be important to change, I think is a really important piece. So that's sort of the takeaway tip from all of that. I merged everybody together. The other thing that I would say is taking the time, and David, it goes back to you talking about your customers and engaging with them. Taking time to read and learn from associations like NGen or Supply Chain Canada or, the American Marketing Association, which technically has a Canadian chapter. There's lots of associations out there with very like-minded people who are going through the exact same painful development that you want to, and, they can give advice and share, and everybody's just one big community. And I find everybody's so willing to just say, yes, you know what, I'll sit on your panel. I'll have a phone call. I'll chat about that. And you might as well take advantage of it. And then the one thing that I did when I was younger, and Nastaran, you talked about this as earlier with the mentor, is I actually created an informal board of directors. So I cherry picked people that I thought were just amazing. And I literally picked somebody like a CFO, I picked HR folks, like people that weren't in my original side, which has always been MarTech, but different roles. I picked, males, females, typically more experienced than I was. That was kind of the point. All different industries, because I wanted to learn from them and sort of understand, like, well, why would they think about it in this way that's different than the way I think about it? And how do I sort of retrain my mind to think about it from their perspective as well, right from the get-go? And that was like such a eye-opener. And now when I look back, and you always see those things on LinkedIn about credit, people who helped you along the road, like those people are the most influential people I think I've ever worked around. So, whether that's you're trying to find someone more seasoned because you're younger, or you're just looking at the network around, I would say that's a big thing. So we are at 20 after, so perfect. We've got a number of questions I'm going to go through, and I'm going to lob them at one particular person or a couple people just to make sure we get through all of them. But I know this one's for Nastaran. So the question is about self-modifying code, so the machine learning, self-learning. Do you have a set of policies around implementing an app with self-healing?
Absolutely, yes. And that's basically the outcome of all of those self-healing, to ensure that we reduce the cost of improving our app and cost of expanding our app.
Okay. So when you think about policies, was it something, again, I think I already know the answer to this, you wrote out in the beginning, but is like a live document, you're constantly updating those policies and
it is
processes?
A living process. It's a living policy. We start with a couple of very simple principles, and really keyword here is to be simple. We can go to the rabbit hole of edge cases forever. So we are refraining from those, but keeping it simple and making sure that the most vulnerable area of the code and most important functions. There are many functions within an app, within a website. Which are the key? Which ones are the key? Those are being the backbone of making the rules and principles.
Okay. So I have another question here, and actually it's timely because we talked about the last 24 months and what that's done. And I like to pretend we're all on the back end, but then I heard China close down again. So I don't know, but for the next 24 months, if each one of you could just for a moment, just highlight what you think. So the question is, what are the next big disruptors that are going to push us to innovate? I'm going to start with Dany, then David, then Nastaran.
Well, I don't like to talk about diversity as a disruptor, but it's something that's really is becoming a game changer, not just in a broadcast industry, but I think throughout society. And if we don't do a better job of ensuring that we engage with communities that have been underrepresented thus far, I think that it's just going to be a weaker way forward for our society overall. So to me, that's going to be a big focus over the next 24 months for sure.
Yeah. David?
I agree with Dany 100% on that comment. And certainly from my perspective, I see companies trying to figure out that issue and not quite getting there across the board. I mean, the next 24 months, I don't want to be depressing and talk about like global conflict and the fraying of Western democracy and all of that stuff, although I am surprised by how little we talk about that just as business leaders, because I think we want to just pretend it's not happening. Look, I just think it's connected to what has happened the last 24 months, but I just think people's relationship to work is going to change. I think that's going to impact me in my world, just through the world of employee benefit plans. But I think it's going to impact our ability to execute the kind of transformation that we're talking about, the innovation that we're talking about. And I think we sort of have to rethink how we engage our teams. And I don't think this is going to be sort of a short road and we'll have it figured out. I think we're going to try a lot of different things in the post-COVID world, whether we're in the office or out of the office or a little bit of both. And I just think it's not going to be a quick path to figuring out how to work together again.
Okay. Nastaran?
I would love to think this is the last crisis that we have put aside. Human history shows this is not the case. We are going to see very different but frequent crisis, whether if it is self-inflicted wound like those idiotic wars that are happening in the world, or something like, this tiny virus that will come and shake our world altogether. The learning from this area is if you can change it, put all your effort to change it. If you cannot learn how to adapt with the side effect and after fact of it, which is what we are doing with the COVID part. So the resiliency, the muscle memory that we have built from that is helping with getting ready for adapting and being nimble and flexible for whatever that is thrown at us, to do our best effort and whatever it takes to change and adapt as much as possible.
Okay. I would say, I would have said supply chain if I put my work hat on, but I would actually say culture for me is the biggest one. We talk about the Great Resignation and people being disparate locations. And, on one hand, we're always on. And so the team building through Teams or Zoom or whatever we're using has been magnified. And I personally love that. But I think it's really, COVID has really shook up how people want to live their life and how they want to work and what their expectations are. So that'd be a big one. So I have one last little question. It's actually my own. But I want to ask, if you had to choose one word to describe how people in your organization have reacted to, I was going to say innovation, but I'm going to say disruption. What would that word be? And I would say on the back half of COVID, it's energized. Maybe not so much on the front half of COVID, but on the back half, disruption, I think, has been exciting for us. Maybe I'll start again with Dany, then David, then Nastaran.
So for us, I would say mobilized from day one when we had to bring in the news to right now when we're still innovating, it's really that people are completely engaged and understand the mission. And I mean, I don't want to use the word war, given what's going on in Europe at the moment, but it's like there's been a war in front of us, and everyone's come in with all of their tools to fight it together. So mobilize is the word that comes to mind for me.
Okay, David?
I threatened to give you more than one at the beginning, and I was chastised roughly. I know you want, I mean, certain population absolutely excited. I also had another EX word, exhausted. I think people have come through a lot, and now I don't know how excited certain people are in my organization to hear the word transformation now. But I think there's a wariness too, just around what this means. And if you have a tired workforce, can we pull some of this off? But underneath it all, I think people think it's cool.
Okay. Nastaran?
I would say motivated. And to build what David is saying, we are physically exhausted, but mentally elated, motivated for what is coming. But definitely physically, there are so many areas that we need to still take care.
I feel like we have an alliteration here. We've got energized, exhausted, excited, elated, mobilized, and motivated. So that's, I'm going to stop. There are a couple of other questions, but just due to time, I'm going to have to just squeeze it close. It's 10:29. I just wanted to say thank you so much. If you haven't connected with myself or anyone on the panel, I would encourage the audience to do that. And if you are actually interested in sitting on a panel or discussing innovation further, come knock on my door. Happy to do that. And I have 2 books that I think you should go and check out if you haven't read them. Practically Radical by Bill Taylor, which is actually my ultimate favorite book. He's one of the co-founders of Fast Co. And Screw It, Let's Do It by Richard Branson. And both those stories both those books tell stories about people that have really decided to just break down the walls and think different and just figure out a new way of working. So I love it. So thank you again, everyone, for indulging me and sitting on the panel and coming listening and spending an hour and a half with us. So thank you. That's it.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.